just want to make me look like an asshole.
You got your pizza, bro? What do you got there?
A little bit of pizza.
What's
A little pizza. I'm just
on the pizza?
having some dinner.
What's on the pizza?
Processed meat.
Traditional processed meat.
Yes, absolutely. Pepperoni, a little bit of sausage.
All right, Misfits, welcome to your survival guide, episode 9. Roll those credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
From Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Ipox.
And we are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life and casually eat pizza during a podcast. So, Broedy, here we go. Misfit survival guide. So I'm going to give some context. Misfits. It sounds a bit random. So here's the purpose of this episode. Here's the premise: is that if you're a misfit like us, like you'll most likely find yourself on the fringe of things, either as work or relationships or family, school, whatever it happens to be, right? And this can often be a lonely, confusing, frustrating, painful situation to be in. You know, if you think a little different, act a little different, you know, you want to do things a little different. So with the coming up of this episode, we wanted to come up with some strategies or approaches where you can stay true to who you are and still feel supported and healthy and sane in doing what it is that you want to do. Is that a fair assessment, Broedy? How's that set us up for episode 9?
Perfect. I'm ready for it.
Nice. Excellent contribution.
Thank you. Still picking pizza out of my teeth. You threw
all
me
right.
So...
We'll throw to a quick word to our sponsor, and you can take a bite of pizza. We'll be right there. Warning: this podcast contains 80% mischief, 10% inappropriate humor, 7% intelligence, 3% weird accents, tattoos, and poor decisions optional. Rated PG-13. Some material may be unsuitable for boring Betty's. Discretion advised. The Professional Misfits podcast. It does what it says on the box.
Misfit Cereal, now available as a t-shirt at promisfitpodcast.com.
Get your Misfit Cereal Box t-shirt, and don't forget to sign up to Camp Misfit to get all the episodes 2 weeks in advance and bonus episodes and all the sexy things. So, season 3, episode 9. Here we go. Broedy, Misfit Survival Guide. Do we really need one? Are we speaking to a brick wall? Or do you think this is a valuable thing? Do you think this is a sort of valuable approach?
I do, but I will say that I questioned it when we first came up with the topic, just the way that you are. I wondered, mainly because we'd done an episode last season kind of on our own moral codes and ethics, and I feel like this could have gotten redundant, but now with it, the frame the way that it is, I think it is a necessary thing. And the reason I say that is because think about how many pieces of literature or film or whatever you want to look at that could have been created and or wasn't, that has changed someone's ability to deal with things. And for a long time, and I'd say especially from like the ages of 11 to about 15, I really struggled with the fact that I didn't understand why I wanted to be alone. And it's, I'd love to save someone from that. And even if it was one person, one kid, one situation that they felt relief from not knowing what to do or not having any tools or ideas even. I think it's necessary. What about you? I mean, we've talked about it. Could you imagine Chris in elementary and needing the support that you did, and it coming in the form of either, a listenable episode or something that, even as catchy as you and I writing something called the Misfit Survival Guide.
Yeah. I hear you. I think I know I came up with this episode, and now I think I finally understood why I came up with this episode. And it's as an antidote to the generic advice of, oh, just be yourself, right? Because whoever you are, if you've been in school or if you've been the odd one anywhere, or work, relationships, it doesn't matter what it is, single, together, whatever, that is that Disney line, like, just be true to yourself. And it's left there like it's some miracle moral that will just somehow
little magic nugget.
That's it. It'll, you flick that switch, you'll no longer be heartbroken, you'll no longer be disappointed, you'll get the job of your dreams, everything just works out because you're just true to yourself. And so I'm calling bullshit. But if I call bullshit, I have to offer something that's practical that you can apply, right? So if just being true is generic shit advice, then all right, then what are some decent strategies that you can apply?
Right.
And again, like, decide for yourself, misfits, right? But I think it's sort of, if the status quo, and surely, like, post-COVID, we've in some degree have experienced it, of work or life or relationships being disrupted. And the one thing that COVID gave most of us was a pretty stark mirror of, is this how I want to live my life? Is this how I want to keep going forward? Is this how I want to be treated by employers and people around me? That was the premise of this podcast. Like, we can do it differently. You're going to have to. Like, we'll do it differently. We'll talk about it. Do you want to come with us, for instance? And I'm also going to, while we're talking about this, I'm going to borrow heavily from a book from Ellen de Botton, who I've talked about a lot, called Status Anxiety. Because this book in particular, what it does is it lays out 5 common challenges or pain points in sort of the culture of today, like lovelessness or not having enough money or just disappointment of expectations, whatever. And in the second half of the book, he offers 5 solutions to these life pain points, 3 of which I think are relevant for this discussion. Okay. Right? So, and we might get into that. And I might even throw up, a little template of my own, Broedy. So be aware for that in the edit. Hey. But it's it's meant to address that sort of unspoken, silent, private shame of, you don't fit in, and you're a little bit different, but you try your best to sort of fit in, and that's not quite working, or the relationships quite not working. You can't find the right people around you. So before I dive too heavily into it, Broedy, just remind me that I'm making sense. Is this something that you identify with? Because I know, like, this topic was a little bit left to center, but we decided to step into it for the Misfits.
Yeah, no, like I said, I mean, number one, that kind of guide or permission that not every bit of advice that I'm getting is pure and real, is that alone, I think even in the first 5, let's just end the episode now. I mean, 8 minutes, fucking that is impactful enough to sit and stand in that spot and say, this stuff is kind of bullshit, and you don't have to feed into it, and it doesn't have to be your solution. And fucking matter of fact, it's not 90% of people's solutions. So don't feel, I just think that alone. I think that alone is enough. So no brick wall, no talking to the void. I think this is actually going to hit more people than you expect.
Have you ever had circumstances there in your life, in your upbringing, where you're starting to realize, like, everyone wants the job and the 9 to 5 and the wife and the kids, and, like, I don't think I do, and what was the resistance and sort of advice around that? Because you still get shit that you're not married, So
Yeah.
oh,
Fuck.
and just to add in, like, and how? No, we'll start there. I'll let you answer. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, really quickly, I think without putting my finger on it, I knew that the normal path was not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure. I can't give you an exact instance. I can't give you the aha moment of me being like, "Fuck, this is not me." But
I mean, the fairy godmother didn't swoop in and go,
no, she
"Broedy, you're
didn't.
different. You're special.
I
You're
fucking
not
wish
like
she
these
did.
other kids." Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish she
Right. Yeah.
did
Yeah. Yeah.
because for me it was dropping out of school and playing with the darker side of things that kind of made me realize that I would do just about anything to get away from that path. And it didn't matter where I was going to go as long as it meant I was not going to be like one of them. And that sounds fucked up. And I'm not saying, the normal path or going to school or getting the job, getting the wife, doing the thing is any sort of wrong. That's just what was playing in my head. I'm not going to be like them. And I don't think it was necessarily healthy at first. I don't think it was necessarily healthy at first because, like you said, I felt it constantly. The thought that I didn't fit in. And I want to give the Misfits a little bit of context here. My father is not my biological father. I don't know who the fuck he is. I don't know where the fuck he is. I don't. My father, he raised me and he accepted me as his own from about a year old and on. But the thing that came with that was after I had clarity on who my dad was or wasn't, about 12 years old, I saw why I didn't fit in with that side of the family at all.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, there's a few members of that side of the family that went above and beyond to make me feel special and a part of the family and those kind of things. But you can't deny, you know what I mean? Genetically, these motherfuckers are exactly the same. I'm not even talking personality wise yet. And yes, they are all the same. And I wasn't. I didn't look like a Farns. I didn't move like a Farns. I didn't have the same interests as the Farnses. I didn't. And that was tough. So that was right from the get, you know what I mean? And then you get into school and you're around all these people. And for me, I played chess club up until fourth, fifth grade. I did things on my own. I was kind of the artsy kid. I liked to draw. I'd go to art camps more than I'd go to, football or those kind of things. So I was already kind of setting myself up to be a misfit. And like I'm saying, I imagine that kid. I imagine that kid. And even just if it was the older me, who I am now, being able to go sit down at the chess table and say, hey, for the rest of your life, it might feel like you're a little bit different, but that's not a bad thing. I think that simple statement, just that, probably would have been enough for me. And no one showed up with that. The resistance that I got through my entire life was, why can't you just be like them?
Yeah.
Why can't you just get a job? Why can't you just do this? Why can't you just, and it's like, bro, I don't, first of all, I don't want to. There's something in me that I recognize is a desire and it has nothing to do with the shit you're trying to line in front of me. And secondly, you've already said it. I can't. I fucking can't. Like I could, but I can't, and having someone too to say to me that's like, hey, you don't necessarily need an explanation for that either. That's a big thing. Like I think a lot of kids out there go, I'm different for X, Y, and Z, and there needs to be a reason why.
Yeah.
The fuck there doesn't. There's variables. You're different. There's out of fucking the 20 billion possibilities of our genetic code, like you are different. Like, so who fucking cares? So it's just, yeah, it's just that weird thing where I think the most important thing for me looking back and those moments where it's like, what made you realize was more or less those were shitty because I realized I was alone, not necessarily different.
And that was the follow-up that I was going to ask at the beginning, was when you realize in the outside, there's often a real strong pull to jump back inside, like to get back in, to be safe, because you don't really want to be left outside alone in the dark, whatever it happens to be. But some of us do, whether by choice or whether we don't have a choice because we're not going to get included. And if you're outside for long enough, that can affect you. You can become resentful of, say the family, or for me it was the school kids. You can become angry and hurt, and these are all natural things. And I guess part of what I wanted to explore in this episode was like, how can you exist on the outside but sort of stay sane, stay healthy, and still sort of commit to and explore to who you are without having to, wanting to be accepted by everyone? Because surely that is more toxic, of like forcing yourself to be something you're not, like cutting off parts of you in order just to fit in and be accepted. Surely that's more toxic than anything else.
Yeah.
Because it's not, again, because it's not for everyone. And that's why I really am critical of this. Like, oh, just be yourself. It's like, well, fuck you, because it's not that easy for everyone. And had you told me that as 6-year-old Chris, I would have come home in tears and said it didn't work. Like, the truth didn't work. I still got beat up. I still had everyone picking on me. And from out of that, I had to learn to lie.
Right.
And hide it. And at times, and it's sort of something that I still do to this day because it's fun. Because, like, fuck yeah, But so the Disney version didn't work. And even to your case of like, if someone just told me like, you're allowed to be different and that's okay, I would have heard you, but I have to go back to school next day. Right. And that's no one's keeping me safe. No one's protecting me. No one's listening to me. No one's believing me. So it's not until you get to adolescence and you start to sort of unpack some of this, and you might find some other misfits that you get along with, but you realize you're all sort of on the fringe. So it's sort of survival by numbers. Every arts kid will understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
And then if you get to adulthood, and if you bother to do the self-reflection, because again, not a lot of people do. You got other things to do. You got to earn money. You want to get married. You want to have a kid. You got car repayments, or worry about the Johnson project. Who knows? But with a certain degree of self-reflection, you might try and figure out, why you operate like this, and if you're comfortable or if you're not comfortable, or how do you do that? So now that we've spent 20-ish minutes sort of outlining the context and the challenges, here's some of the suggestions that Alain de Botton sort of lays out in his book. So the three main ones that I took away with it is so the first one is sort of exploring philosophy. Exploring philosophy, not to get too grandiose about it, but if you start exploring the notion of suffering, and on the one hand, you've got, was it Kant? No. Schopenhauer, the saltiest philosopher of all time, who swore, life is hell is other people, and you're better off living in a small fireproof room just to insulate yourself from all of it. Now, then you sort of move along to Nietzsche, and Nietzsche is perhaps my favorite philosopher because he changed his mind. He was a massive devotee of Schopenhauer in the beginning, of can't stand other people, their cabbage heads, all these sorts of things. I'll insulate myself from everything. And it wasn't until sort of I think it was late 20s, that he, originally from Austria, Switzerland, in that region. I should know. Terrible. Please correct me in the comments. Anyway, and then he spent a summer in the south of Italy. And all of a sudden, he's enjoying sunshine and salt air and eating food drenched in olive oil. And maybe thinks, you know what, maybe the world isn't all suffering. And maybe if we have a capacity for suffering, we might equally have a capacity for joy. And in that moment, he 180'd his view on life and started to design sort of his own philosophy. But like, again, like through critical reasoning of like the life I lived in my homeland and my town, and the great thinkers thought like this. And even he like went away to a foreign land, tried something different, said, this is actually pretty good, didn't reject all of it, and said, well, maybe I can change my entire way of thinking. Why am I here? Philosophy, suffering. Part of studying philosophy for me was two things. One, understanding suffering and what it is. Two, even just as a frame of reference to go, oh, this isn't new. Like this isn't new, you know, since the dawn of time. And you can look at like all the great philosophers, from the Greeks to the Europeans to even modern day. You know, I just discuss the human condition, our relationship from ourselves to each other, the social contract, and what this means. And what you sort of come to understand is like there is a lot of suffering, but it can be managed. It isn't new. It might feel raw and brutal and confusing for you for the first time, but have some solace that other people have gone through it and they've written on it. So I know you're a fan of the Stoics.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, one of the greatest principles I think that I've taken away from any Stoicism is that it's not necessarily the abandonment of emotion. It's the persistence through them, right? And I think the way that you're framing that is kind of the way that I move through those philosophies. Is it is a bit of exploring, right? When I talk about philosophy in general, it's more often than not things above me. And I don't have any problem admitting that. So when I move into those kind of subjects or things like this, even where it's purely explorative, for me to, and it's funny you bring up the example of Nietzsche, because I get the same sentiment that that's what it was, that it was a definitive change of his mind. And you can't get there when you're closed off to it. And for a large portion of my life, I don't think I realized I was shut off to other experiences. And where I want to touch on that is like, I don't know if that was outside influences, or like you were talking about, where it's, you know, situations that I decided to put myself in to explore for whatever fucking reason, you know. But ultimately, where do you stake that ground that is the 180 or the opening door moment where it's like, I'm not just a misfit on the fringes and this sucks and it's lonely. It's I'm different and I'm unique, and there's something robust about the way that I fucking handle and deal with things. And if I could tap into that and share that, I wouldn't be so alone, you know?
Yeah. So yes. Now the reason, if we're talking about healthy strategies and approaches to coping with this sort of thing, the reason I mentioned philosophy first is not to be elitist, but to demonstrate that philosophy or philosophical approach will help to give you an objective understanding of circumstance. When you're the misfit, when you're on the outside, it's generally a painful experience. It's seldom a comforting experience to be excluded or be shown to be different, right?
Yeah.
And so let's say that's a little pinch, little pain point. For a lot of us, yes, it's an emotional thing, but philosophy helps you to become objective. Like, well, why does it hurt? Why does this matter? And then you should go through this critical reasoning. Cool. You should go through this critical reasoning of, well, I behave like this and I get treated this way. Is the behavior worth it? Or is acceptance by the group worth it? Or is the money worth it? Or is my partner still going to love me or not? Are they worth it? It's right. So it helps you to become objective about your emotional condition.
Yeah, that was perfect. Philosophy helps you become objective. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
And sometimes you need that. I'm going to talk about the arts in a second to demonstrate that you don't just need objectivity, and this isn't about disconnecting emotion. But if you want some space between how you feel and your confusion in the moment and your circumstance, to kind of stand up on the mountain to get an objective view of your circumstance, philosophy as an approach, and there's a ton of resources out there for yourself.
Where were you when I was a kid, man? Where were you when I was a kid?
But it's always, you've got to be able to hear it. I wouldn't have listened to this really back then.
No, you're right.
And who's to say? Anyway, but objectively, here's a strategy. Here's a tool. Here's a whole bunch of resources that you could tap into. See if it's for you, right? But you'll come to understand that the suffering, the disconnect isn't uniquely your fault. These things happen throughout time. These things happen with individuals, and it will come and go in phases. I would believe.
Okay, well then that raises the question then, what are some examples of a misfit that people maybe idolize in that sense that it may or may not be positive? Because this is going to sound so incredibly corny. I don't give a shit. My brain immediately went to Albert Einstein, and again, misfit. Dude was so. People don't get this too. He was not liked in his time. He was not enjoyed and prophesied over. Like he fucking went through a lot of shit to have the things that he created and did acknowledged the way that they should be. And there's oftentimes that didn't even happen. You know what I'm saying? Like that didn't even happen. But that to me, as much as I as a misfit can go, God, it's great that he was there and he wrote about it and I can understand and these kind of things. But fuck being that guy. That sounds shitty. I'm not interested. I don't give a fuck if you have been there. I don't want to go there. Do you know what I mean? And it's like some of the tools on the opposite side of the thing where it's not just, oh, go be yourself, where it is kind of like sit in the shit or go experience something fucking different, and that might not be good, and that those kind of things might not all be positive. You know what I mean? Like it's not just this fucking thing I hand you and it's a little nice present with a bow on it. It can be dark.
When you asked me, my mind immediately jumped to Socrates, seeing as we're talking about philosophy. And so for those who don't know, Socrates, can't remember exactly AD, but one of the big three philosophers.
Yep.
And he was not an attractive man. He was short, he was stunted, he had a giant bulbous forehead. He basically lived as a pauper despite being married, but was so into his philosophy and exploring thought that he would literally just roam the streets and ask strangers questions, and challenge generals on the concept of bravery. Like, what does it take to be brave? And the general was like, well, you never retreat. And he's like, well, I remember at this battle you retreated from the Persians but then regrouped and counterattacked and won. And well, that's true, so maybe you need to be strategic and brave. So this idea of critical reasoning, but obviously this agitated a lot of the public, but specifically
because
it
we
was
like our
when,
definitions.
yeah, and it was specifically when I think that the sons of certain well-to-do citizens and senators would start hanging out with Socrates and then go home and question the parents. So Socrates was charged and brought before the court for corrupting the youth of Athens, right? And this giant public trial, put on trial for corrupting the youth, and turning them away from religion and all these sorts of things. Because, oh, well, if Zeus really was good, or if Apollo, did please him, then would they have done this, and should you have done that? And, asking the question. So he was put on trial for corrupting the youth of Athens, and was found guilty by a narrow margin, but had the chance to offer a rebuttal, right? To make his case and save his life. And I think he started, if the vote was something like 55-45, he opened by saying, oh, I didn't think it'd be so narrow a margin, expecting to be convicted by more. And he basically doubled down, whereas like, I haven't corrupted anyone. And, like a donkey's tail swatting a fly, like I'm the fly on the arse of Athens. And made this case of asking the question and agitating isn't corruption, but so be it, to the will of the council. And in the end, was found guilty and sentenced to death, which was to drink hemlock and commit suicide. Tragic end to one of the greatest thinkers of all time. Now, what was interesting was the aftermath, which no one really talks about.
I'm so glad you're going to this story. I'm just sitting here smiling at the most morbid fucking story, but I know where it's going. So
yeah, it's so within a few months, the public realized, well, the court of public opinion is like, we made a mistake, and he was harmless, and he hadn't done anything wrong, and they turned on all of the senators and the outspoken socialites who had condemned Socrates, so much so that I think one of the palaces, well, not palaces, but, palladiums, was ransacked and torched. One committed suicide. A few fled into exile.
yeah, a lot of people say that Socrates' death was the Achilles heel of Athens.
And it wasn't immediate.
No.
It was like months, almost to a year later, that it all turned around and they realized this was a massive mistake. But yeah, look, we're unlikely to be charged with corrupting the youth and turning them away from the gods. But yeah,
you never know.
you never know. But it's funny because Seneca, much later, another philosopher, was put to death by a Roman emperor and chose to go out in the same way, based on, out of respect for Socrates. It's like, if the emperor is ordering me to commit suicide, then fine, like give me the hemlock, like in the name of Socrates, and I'll do it as well. Like, so that's pretty baller to set the standard of.
Yep. well, look, I hate to say like a philosophy is a catch-all, right? But like, I mean, it's like you said, it allows you to become objective, number one. And I think what is so powerful about that, again, looking at Seneca, right? Him choosing that path, if he hadn't become objective to it, never would have had the impact that is still talked about right now to this day between you and I.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
And again, it's funny too, because for the theme of this episode, I think a large portion of that, regardless if it was influence, was him standing his ground to who he was. And that's he wasn't praised for it. He wasn't fucking given accolades. He was killed. He was fucking killed for it. That's the thing that I think people misconceive the most about true authenticity, is they find this thing about authenticity, and it's the thing that people like about them. and then they're stuck there.
Yeah.
Right there, and they realize, wow, there's a whole fuck ton more to me than this stupid fucking niche that I stuck myself in for the rest of all time.
Yeah.
Being yourself is not always enjoyable. It's not always fucking fun. It's not always the best experience. Fuck, half the time you feel lost in who you are, because guess what? You're fucking exploring. You're designing as you go.
And
Exactly.
and if there's any takeaway from this episode, hopefully, is like you independently have the power to change that if you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Yeah.
But we'll stick with this. All right. So what else? So there's philosophy. Cross it off the list.
Mm-hmm.
Second recommendation is to look to the arts. Look to the arts, my friends. Real simple example. You're feeling alone. You're feeling upset. You feel like no one understands you. How many songs have been written as if they were written for you, as if they're describing exactly your life, and that you can't put them on without crying?
Interesting. What the fuck? I love this. This is which book? Can we
Yeah,
one more time?
Plug. So it's Status Anxiety by Alain de Botton. There we go.
I mean,
and again, it's as a point of like, go to the museum. Go to the museum, go to the gallery, walk along, realize, read into the history of any of the portraits of the great paintings, realize they're all rooted in heartbreak, in disappointment, in greed, in lust, in pursuit of expectation, in the rejection of God, in the misunderstanding of life in the universe.
The extremes.
All of these sort of things, and realize you're not alone. And for many, it's always been this way and is condition of the universe.
It's interesting too, because art is so versatile, and I say this to any misfit that's kind of pushed themselves away from it, because I think in my own personal experience, and I've seen this with my own kids, arts are not looked at the same, and media and the fast-paced fucking social media lifestyle have really taken that space from the arts, and it's funny too, because it's like you said, it's this sliding scale of course there's art and expression and things out there that fall in the positive side of things, but if you actually, I mean, really dig into this kind of thing, you begin to understand that a ton of this is through suffering, is through pain, and the expression of it.
Right. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So here's the difference between philosophy and the arts, and where I draw the parallel. Whereas philosophy will allow you to be objective, hopefully give you the tools to be objective to your situation. The arts kind of sinks into your pain. It says, all right, you're frustrated. What do you want to do about it?
Allows you to become immersed.
You're heartbroken. How can you use this? What do you want to do with it? You see injustice in the world. What do you want to do with it? You only in the arts, and it requires some masochism and finesse.
Agreed.
Is to sink in to that thing. Look, it's a really funny thing. You ask any singer-songwriter, it's so much easier to write from heartbreak than it is to write about happy things. For whatever reason, it's just because heartbreak like grips you, grief. So you are allowed to sink into these emotions, and really explore all of it.
Why is that? Why is that sadness is more understandable than happiness? I mean, that's a very strange point to make, and I actually cannot argue it whatsoever.
I don't know. And maybe it's something to do with the way we're wired, because whatever the stat is about we're highly more risk avoidant than we are like pursuing pleasure, for instance.
Yep.
layman's attempt to try to draw a parallel,
Hmm.
but I don't know, but it is a universal truth that heartbreak is easier to write from. And it takes, I can tell from experience, it takes professionalism to understand that, to be able to craft and create something without constantly squeezing blood from a stone, right? It becomes really, really difficult to always put yourself in that place to keep writing. So
fuck that.
Yeah. And yeah. So and so that's the thing. Like all great songs like move us in that way. All great films, great pictures, great stories, move us in that way, but they tap into this emotion because somebody's been through this before. One of my favorite examples, and I use it in my book, Applied Creativity, is Nina Simone, right? And one of the seminal moments that drove her, I wish I could remember the school, but I think it was Juilliard. Like, as a young black girl, she applied for Juilliard and didn't get in. And it sort of crushed her and broke her heart. But what do you do with that? Are you going to stop singing? Tell me, listen to Feeling Good by Nina Simone. Tell me that's not seminal. Tell me anytime she opens her mouth for any song, you can't immediately recognize who she is. Tell me she isn't like a haunting, heartbroken premise who just will destroy your life. Amazing talent, amazing skill as a performer.
So can I frame a question here, and it's one that's going to bother me because I've dubbed myself a misfit for so long. Have misfits just convinced themselves they're more alone than they are?
Broedy, eyepox.
I'm sitting here listening to all this, and I'm like, holy shit! This is not an individual phenomena that we are all talking about or experiencing, but do the few that feel the fringes just identify with it harder?
Okay. Excellent question. I'm going to be annoying and say yes and no. I'm going to start with no first. No, they're not just identifying it for fun. For instance, when tragedy or these sort of disconnects happen, it is like lightning strikes. Like, bam, you're alone. No one thinks like you do.
Yeah.
Heartbroken, breakup. You're not heard at the meeting. Like, everyone's sitting around the table. No one asked you what you thought. No one even glanced at you, or they sort of brushed over you. Bam! Like, you're the one.
Yeah.
Right. Now that is a solitary, isolating experience, and that can hurt. Or you come home from work and you just cannot connect with your partner for whatever reason. You're doing everything right. It's just the communication's not there. Something's evaporated, and this is this person you're supposed to be the most intimate with, and you're not connecting. Like, that's isolating, right? So there's that. On the other side of the fence, where I would say yes, is because it can, if this is your experience, and it has been for mine for an awfully long time, it can get comfortable, and then you start to wear it as a badge of honor. And then you're the emo, edgy kid who's like, fuck you, I'm not like any of them. It's so hard for me. You don't understand. And, like every other incel.
Yeah, right? No. And it's funny too, because I really wasn't thinking so far on the edge of that spectrum. And it just crossed my mind as much as we use examples of people that went through, I mean, much more horrendous situations than the Gen Pop, right? If you were to pull a situation that would relate to the Gen Pop, there's just not about very many people that you can name that wouldn't have experienced that thing, right? And then you've got the people like you and I, where it's like I might have analyzed it harder than you did. I might have spent a little more time in it than you did. But am I really different from you?
And that's a worthwhile question. And look, this is why we're having this episode. Is like, how do we negotiate this in a healthy way? I was actually I had a video chat with a guy yesterday from LinkedIn. I won't name him, but he knows who he is, and shout out. So here's this for context. If you're worrying about like misfits and like, are we really just an outsider? Lives in Florida, young black man, gay, living in Florida, conservative Christian all around him, conservative Christian and white all around him. And according to his version of events, even southern flags a few blocks from his joint.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, on the Australian side of things, Florida, conservative, elderly, white Christian.
There you go. So that's where he's at. Currently living with his folks. And then to kind of mix in a little bit of extra, very, very bright kid, partnered with 2 or 3 other friends from college. They put together a startup, which they were in line for, I think, seed A VC funding. And we were sort of talking about that. So when I'm asking him, like, how's life, how's the new year, how's everything else, this was his recitation for me. And so you ask, do we just default to misfits and it's so hard? Here's an example of a guy who's acutely aware that he's different to everyone in his social circle. He's even different to everyone in his family. His aspirations are different financially and professionally. What should he do? How
Nice
can
rebuttal.
he, right? And
Nice.
as an example, right? How can he navigate his life as a young, gay, black professional kid, stay healthy, not have to adopt, the hetero facade to slip in and be accepted. And I apart from, this is part of, I guess, what's influenced this conversation, is like you want people to be able to live authentically in themselves, even if that means, being on the fringes and being different. Just being yourself is not a solution for him right now.
Right.
Fair. Just own it. No.
Oh, dude.
No. Now, and then to this conversation, is philosophy an option to objectively examine? Yes. The arts, and stepping into your creativity and your creative expression, even privately, is that an option? It's absolutely a fucking outlet. Absolutely. Look, if nothing else, the 90-something journals you can see on the back wall, that's all that was for me. Like, for me, it's mental and emotional housekeeping, and often it's, why am I single? What's going on?
I'd argue then it's expression.
Yeah.
And it's funny framing it that way, because then, to me at least, it makes a ton more fucking sense, right? Even when listening to someone else's art or things like that, it's the ability to finally have something articulated to that experience, and now you can express it. Like, I can fucking sing that song and fucking know that I am letting some part of that go, or I'm writing in the journal and releasing that. Interesting.
And I don't know if I've shared this before, but the only reason I started journaling was because I didn't have any friends.
No, you haven't.
Huh.
No. Well, I think it's funny too, and I'm glad that you did share that, because anybody that's been listening for a long amount of time knows you journal. I think because of how positively you view it, I would have never assumed that that's where that started. And that's what I love about the arts as well, because again, that started in an expression of something that was not good. It was not
No.
it wasn't good, it turned into something good, and like that's unique. That's unique. It's very, most of the time, definitive, right? If I smoke a cigarette as a fucking crutch, that's a bad fucking crutch, right? If I go for a run, that's a healthy fucking. There's not very many things that within one end of the spectrum can change throughout it, right? And even though at the beginning of your experience, the expression of the bad stuff was the good thing, still probably wasn't fucking comfortable.
No. So So for context, it started when I was 19. I had my first real girlfriend. We'd been together for 2 years, and we just moved in together. Funnily enough, and we'd been living together for a couple of months. And I even had my best friend Steve at the time since high school best friend. So forever, and girlfriend at the time, 2 years. I'm 19. I'm such an adult, and then right? And then she dumped me. And I had to move back home, which was, tail between your legs, really, really emasculating.
Oh, that age,
that
it's crippling. Oh my God.
It is. After you've moved out, it's like a fuck you, and like I'm an adult now, and it lasted all of 3 months, right? But Steve took her side. So I lost my girl, and I lost my best friend since high school.
Dick.
Hey, that's life sometimes. So no friends, forced back home. Oh, that's right. That was, and Glenn gave me the mandate of like, sure, you can move back home on the condition that you're going to uni next year.
I remember this conversation.
It wasn't even just, we'll be parents and we'll accept you. It's like, no. We will emotionally blackmail you to go back to uni. And that's the only reason you're coming back. I had nowhere else to go. Okay, sure. So in between, fuck. I'm having anxiety all over again. So in between, it must have been the end of the year. So I've got 3 or 4 months before uni goes back.
Mm-hmm.
I have no friends, none. I have no one I can talk to. Can't talk to anyone in my family. Can't talk to anyone immediately. Whatever all this shit is that's going on inside of me, I need to get it out. So I start journaling. My only option. No one else is going to listen to me. I'll put it on a page. The best thing that I ever did actually was to give myself the mandate of whatever this is, we're going to be honest. No matter how gross, random, stupid, toxic, funny, dumb, profound, whatever, I'm going to be honest, and it's going to go on a page, and we're just going to get it out. And so that's what it became. It became this vent of how to, and then with that came, how do I process this? How do I feel about this? Oh, there's a pretty girl. Like, what do I do? And like, and all the things in my life. And that's become the tool for me ever since. That mandate that I gave myself was the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of being an artist and a writer, because so few individuals, let alone artists, will be honest with their emotions to express them on a page, right? In that moment, I felt like this. Didn't necessarily have to do anything about it, but you have permission to sink into the vengeance, the hate, the disappointment, the expectation, and work through all of those things to then process them to go, okay, so what do I want to do now?
It's funny, every time I journal, I kind of have that's where I land. Right. Is I get through it is the biggest thing. I mean, while we're here and we're finishing up, we've gone over a couple of examples of the book. Then what are your two go-to misfit survival tips? What are the 2 things that have served you the greatest through your life experience?
Mind you, I'm still going through it.
Fair.
I'll make that abundantly clear. I'm still going to the cafe every morning and trying to figure out how to make these things work, and waiting on things and dealing with the frustration and the impatience and trying to juggle money, wondering why I'm still single. going to weddings, my place in the world, and will I actually make anything of myself? Right. Yeah, we've covered journaling. Look, journaling works for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think, all right, here's what I'll do. Find a way to have a pure and honest conversation with yourself. I'm going to try and make this sound practical rather than just esoteric. So for me, it's journaling. Mm-hmm. For me, it's journaling. I even sometimes talk to myself in third person. For some, it might be a long drive in the car. For some, it might be going to the gym. For some, it might be walking the dog. For some, it might be blogging or whatever else. Put your name to it, keep it anonymous, whatever the fuck it happens to be. But find a channel that you can actually be honest with yourself and your emotions and how you feel and what you'd like to do and your dreams and your aspirations. And if you start to notice that there's boundaries or resistance or friction to what you want in the world around you, then know from what we've talked about today that there's other people, there's other artists, there's other humans who have gone through what you have. So at least you're not alone in this. Your struggles and your thoughts and feelings are unique to you, but the situations are seldom unique. I think having the objectivity of philosophy, but and B, the permission of pure honest self-expression of the arts, I think in there is a healthy balance for you to then also claim what's yours, like, and to remain on the outside and be healthy. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to carry a cross all the time everywhere. I think is the best way that I'll sum it up. And that's advice for me as much as it is for anybody else.
Yeah.
What's yours? Yeah. What are your top one or two?
Yeah, no, I don't want to be redundant or echo you, but I think that is for me been the biggest thing. And God, it's been learned. It's taken some time. I like that we're here and saying that, hey, it's okay to talk to yourself, because that for me is that, right? Like, and I journal. I've got it here. I do it every day, but it's not the same, right? Like, so for me, as much as I understand and identify, just like Chris said, that can be that outlet, for me, it's not. For me, it is at the end of the day, right before the day gets quiet, when you start to hear those thoughts, that I can stop myself in my tracks right there and start asking myself why I'm thinking those things. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And really, the biggest thing for me has been expression. So again, echoing and redundancy, I know, I'm sorry, Misfits, but that's the thing. And it is so individual, because the way that each of us describes this, for me, I'm realizing over the years, it's been my social media content. That is a huge megaphone for me to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, or this is the way that I'm thinking, or this is how I'm processing things. So I think the biggest thing is internalizing and then expressing, right? Like those have been the two biggest fucking tools. And what you'll find, like Chris said, is even if it's not necessarily a celebrity or an artist or an author or any of those things, you will find people who have been through exactly what you have. And it's mind-boggling. They lost their mom the same fucking week you did.
Yeah. That's yeah. All right. I know we're wrapping up, but like, and final note though, like maybe you guys are lucky. Maybe you guys at home are lucky, and maybe you have a partner or a best friend or a family friend that you can talk to about all of this. Maybe it doesn't have to be in isolation. Maybe you work best with a sounding board. It could be a psych. It could be your bro or your sis or whoever it happens to be. Like, but arguably, your life is your own, and you can never escape the internal work ever. But, the means and method is entirely up to you, and find what that is.
Which is so powerful. I'm sorry. We're sitting here and talking about it, and I normally don't get on that like self-growth, self-hype kind of shit, but like that's fucking, once you realize that, and you can stand in that, there's something powerful about it. And shit, it's going to take some trial and error.
Yeah. But that's why we built a podcast, folks. It's so you can come back and sort of use it as a touchstone, and a whole bunch of other episodes that you can listen to that we have some sort of random guidance on, perhaps.
Permission at least to be all right.
Permission at least to ask the question. So if nothing else, I hope that it was practical and pragmatic rather than esoteric, because I think we need less of that in life, especially on LinkedIn.
I do too. I was going to tell you, you know what? I was for a half a second bummed that I didn't bring a little more structure to it, as in terms of application of those things. That's not real. We started it with that, you know, and I could have come up with a list of 10 things that you can do to remain authentic, and
10 hot tips to remain authentic in the new year.
But this just felt so much better. And I think a lot of people are looking for that same conversation. So to you misfits at home, like, even if it's like Chris said, just being able to find somebody that you can soundboard this shit off of may fucking just save your life. I mean, seriously, it's that crazy to think that some of the things that we deal with and we go through, we've convinced ourselves that there's no one out there that could possibly help us. Nobody could possibly see or understand. And it's a fallacy, and it's something that we do to ourselves, and you don't have to. You just don't.
Well said. Well said. At the end of episode 9. Season 3, episode 10.
Yeah, I know it's coming. Yes, of course I know. It's the same as every. It's the wrap.
It's every final episode.
It's the only reason they don't have to drink tonight.
Yeah, it's episode 10 is the penultimate boss Misfits. It's the season wrap up. So we'll be talking about everything that we've covered this season, everything that's coming for season 4. You know, what are the bonus episodes that you may have missed out on if you aren't in Camp Misfit? You know, all those sorts of things. So join us as we bring the season to a close, and you can catch up on all the gossip and all the updates. Broedy, anything in particular you're looking forward to for the wrap up of season 3? The wrap up of season 3, that's going to be 40 episodes under the belt.
Yeah, I think so. For me personally, I'm going to come with it with some of our stats and information over the and I think not only for us but the Misfits, it's going to be kind of eye-opening what you can achieve in the length of time that we've been doing this. And yeah, Chris doesn't know, but there may be another potential corporate sponsor as well. Because I've been wearing a cap that has a company on it, and they enjoy that. So we will see. Season 4 is gonna another step up.
Broedy might sell us out for season. I'm in wearing like Pepsi bandanas.
Yes. Armbands and earrings and banners in the background.
All of that. Brilliant. Yeah, right. I love a surprise. Looking forward to it. All right, Misfits, you know the deal. You can find everything and t-shirts at promisfitspodcast.com. Please like and subscribe and do all that sort of stuff, because it helps the channel, it helps us, and we're building a business as much as we're building a channel for you guys. If you want to support us, you can go to Camp Misfit and get all of the episodes 2 weeks in advance, as well as bonus content specifically for you.
You know, one thing that we don't ever talk about too, that I actually got a comment on the other day. We have within our Patreon, whatever tier you access, you will have access to our season 1 video archive. That is the very first season me and Chris got on. Had no intention of putting it on film.
It was supposed to be audio only.
So there's there, and you can enjoy that as well. See the origin story of the Misfits.
I don't know if you should have outed that. But anyway, it is bonus content. Thanks for that. And on that note, I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you for the final boss, episode 10.